Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Data Lab community event, which is this time run in partnership with the Data Lab Academy. My name is Heather Thompson, and I'm the Director of Skills and Education at the Data Lab. The theme of today's event is how to build a career in data and AI, focusing on research and development. And this is part of one of a series of careers events that's designed to highlight the exciting opportunities available across a multitude of sectors in data and AI. Personally, I think this focus on research and development is a really essential topic to cover, as for many, research and development is not necessarily on their radar when thinking about career options. Yet it's a critical path which requires a pipeline of talent to continue filtering through if Scotland is to remain at the forefront of technology and innovation and to keep up with the pace at which this is advancing. Today, our aim is to demonstrate the diversity of innovation in research and development in Scotland and to help you understand how collaborations between academia and industry underpins this work. You all have an increased understanding of the breadth and depth of opportunities in Scotland and how to further explore and take steps towards this type of career path. And to help me do this, I'm delighted to be joined by our fabulous expert panel, Jacob Corrig, Lecturer of Computing at the University West of Scotland, Katie Smith, an Engineering Doctorate Candidate with the EPSRC Industrial CDT for Offshore Renewable Energy, and Professor Helen Hastie, who's Head of School at Informatics at the University of Edinburgh. So just before we dive into the discussion, and I invite the panel to tell you a little bit more about themselves, just some general housekeeping. The session's scheduled to run until 1 o'clock, and we'll do our best to keep to time. You will have the opportunity to ask questions using the Q&A function on Zoom. I would encourage you to try and make sure you use the Q&A function on Zoom and not the chat for putting questions in. It just helps us to keep track of where all the questions are and not miss them. I'd encourage you to add your questions throughout the session, but we will keep them back until the end so as not to distract and detract from the flow of conversation with the panelists. And at the end, I'll let you know about some upcoming events to be kept in the loop. But I would encourage you to join the Data Lab community, which you can do using the QR code that's currently on screen. Our community has over 4,000 members from over 70 countries, and it offers a range of benefits as well as events like this. It's a great platform to build networks, learn and share information. There's an opportunity to sign up to a mentoring programme, either to be a mentor or to be mentored, something I would strongly recommend, as mentoring can really help to support with career development at any stage. There's much more on offer, but the final thing I'll mention is the jobs board, which is a central location where we post all data and AI related jobs that we're aware of, and other members have the ability to post their jobs directly. So without further ado, let's get started. And I'd just like to say a huge welcome to our panelists. I'm just going to start by asking the panelists if they would like to introduce themselves. So just starting in the top of my screen, Helen, would you like to go first with a brief introduction to everybody?
Good afternoon. Thanks, Heather, for having me on. So I'm a Professor of Human-Robot Interaction at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm also the head of school there. Formerly, I was director of 2 CDTs in robots and autonomous systems. So I'm going to assume everybody knows what a CDT is, but in case not, it's a Centre for Doctoral Training. And I was also involved in the National Robotarium there. My research includes looking at how humans and robots can interact in a way that is safe and can instill trust and confidence in humans to try and increase adoptions of robots and AI. So I think that's enough from me. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you, Helen. Jacob?
Yes, hello. I'm Jacob Koenig. I'm a lecturer at the University of the West of Scotland, and I have went through most of the early stages in academia. So I my undergraduate in informatics and then a postgraduate in big data before following on with an industrial PhD, which halfway through turned into a standard PhD because the company sadly went into administration. And then I have skipped the postdoc and got appointed lecturer to Glasgow Caledonian, and now switched recently to UWS. So I've been a lecturer for 3 years now. I'm mostly teaching well, I'm teaching all sorts, but my research is based on AI, and I'm looking at how can we increase the safety of the structural condition monitoring progress. So model of upstyling, or looking at structures manually by using AI. So looking at the visual data and trying to find out where's the fault and what can we do about that.
Thank you, Jacob. And Katie?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Katie and I'm a third year engineering doctorate candidate as part of the ID Core programme. So that stands for Industrial Centre for Doctoral Training in Offshore Renewable Energy. So it's a partnership between Strathclyde, Edinburgh and Exeter universities. I'm doing my research with the Flowwave Ocean Energy Research Facility, which is kind of part of the University of Edinburgh. So Flowwave is an experimental facility. We've got a large wave tank essentially, and we kind of test scaled down models of wind, wave, and tidal devices. So my research is focused on improving the design of these scaled down devices and improving our approach to testing them to make the results more applicable to our numerical simulations.
Great, thank you, Katie. And I'm just going to continue just digging into your area a little bit further. I think one of the things that we get asked quite a lot, it'd be good to hear your version of it, is the term PhD people are quite familiar with, but ND is not such a familiar name unless you're doing it. So, and not all of the universities offer them. So would you like to just explain a little bit about the difference between an engineering doctorate and a PhD, and why you chose that route?
No, definitely. I have to explain this a lot with what the difference is, but essentially an ND is the same academic sort of award as a PhD. It's 4 years rather than usually PhDs are around 3 years, and they're based within industry. So the usual structure is the first year is kind of a broad class taught year, similar to a master's, to get everyone's kind of theoretical knowledge foundation built. And then the further 3 years is the research project, which you're based in a company. So your day-to-day life is in a company, very similar to being an employee. And that's kind of what attracted me to it. I knew when I graduated, I wanted to work in renewable energy, but I didn't kind of know in what format. My background was mechanical engineering, but that's still a very broad scope when it comes to renewable energy. So ID Core was kind of a way for me to upskill in that area and continue doing research, which was something that I really enjoyed from my master's.
Great, thank you, Katie. And Jacob, you took a kind of a similar but different pathway. So Jacob was one of our Data Lab Academy master's students, who then went on to do a Data Lab funded industrial doctorate and PhD, with, as you mentioned in your introduction, Ghetto Tech. So can you tell us a bit about how that worked and how you navigated the academic versus industry expectations and delivery?
Yes, certainly. So my route, as Heather mentioned, was a bit similar to Katie, but it wasn't in ND. So I started my doctorate off in a company, and at that point it was all focused about how can we apply the research that I'm doing as part of the university to benefit the company. And at my point it was, using AI, because the company had no background in that. And how we can navigate the academic and industry expectations in here. So what I was going to do, or what I was doing with academia at this point was create some novel solutions and then write about it in the form of journal or conference papers. Now, on the other hand, the company is not really interested in that, and they're not big enough that they can put a few papers onto their portfolio. So they were actually interested in the physical output. So in my case, it was AI models that use visual data. So at that point, it was a bit of juggling that needed to be done in how can I build the solutions that I want to do, and then also showcase their abilities in kind of academic setting. So I was always in two minds about that. We want to get something working for the company, but at the same time also apply the academic rigor to create papers and then publish them, hopefully. But as I mentioned, the company went into administration 1 year in, but for me, it then was less industry focus, more academic focus, because as I mentioned, I had lost the academic backing, the company backing. So I then went and stayed in the same research area, but I fully went into the academic research on that side. So not only getting the solutions out and working, but rather looking them into a bit more into the detail and the depths of what can we do with a computer vision and AI to apply to my research area, which is structural monitoring.
Great, thanks, Jacob. And Helen, I'm going to ask you about your steps into research development, but just before I do that, I know that you have a lot of experience of supervising PhDs as well, and I think from your experience as supervising, you'll see that kind of pull between academia and industry as well, and having to manage the differing needs and priorities of each. Oh, you're on mute, Helen, I think. Sorry, can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Helen? No, we've lost you, Helen. Oh. No. Oh, maybe. There we go.
Okay,
Right back.
I don't know what's happening. Oh my God. Okay, so industry versus academia as a career path. I always recommend to anybody doing a PhD or thinking about going into academia to spend some time in industry, if it's an internship or if you take a break and do industry, or afterwards after your PhD have a secondment in industry, and because it does give you a different perspective. It's always good to see what the other side do. It helps with project management, time management, and it gives you real world kind of skills in terms of, for example, presentation. And it's not for everybody. I know the salaries are typically higher in industry, but academia has a lot to offer in terms of scientific freedom, of what you can explore. But it's always good to try both.
Great, thank you. And so would you like to tell us a little bit more about how you ended up where you are now and what your first steps were into research and development?
Yeah, so for AI and robotics, as with lots of fields, the future is really interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. So I always liked languages and science, and I was torn between the two. And then the good thing about the Scottish university system is that you can study a number of different things in your first 2 years. So I studied linguistics, AI, maths, computer science, and that led me to computational linguistics, which is basically kind of like the NLP work that we see now. And now, of course, you've got generative AI and ChatGPT. So I've kind of started off with being interdisciplinary, but even if you're not interdisciplinary in yourself, you really need to develop the skills to work with other people from other disciplines. So working with, for example, psychologists, cognitive scientists, it's really a way of getting a different perspective. So I ended up doing linguistics and AI, then went on to do computational linguistics and then speech recognition. And then later on, robots, which is essentially doing all this in an embodied robot in the real world. So it's a bit more difficult. So that came a bit later on. But that's really how I got here.
Great, thanks. And how important would you say that your industry experience has been in developing your academic career?
It's been good for my current job. So currently I'm head of school. So I do a bit of a management job. So it's been very good in terms of life skill, and particularly resilience. And I think everybody understands now how, after COVID, how important resilience is. And doing a PhD is hard, and there's ups and downs. So resilience is really important, and that's one thing you can learn from industry.
Great, thank you. And just carrying on the theme of industry experience, Katie, would you like to talk a little bit about how your industry experience is shaping your ND, and what does the day in the life of research look like? What sort of interaction are you having with your industry partners?
Yeah, so my industry sponsor, as I say, is Flowwave, which is in a bit of a unique position because we have various clients that come in the door, and about 70% of them are industry, and then about 30% are academic projects coming in the door. So I've mainly been working with the industrial clients. So these are many different companies, big companies, small companies. So I actually feel like I have many different industry sponsors, because my work for each of these companies is kind of building up my case study, and it's the outputs of this that are informing more academic outputs that kind of Jacob touched on, the papers and the conferences. So that's kind of how I'm approaching the industry versus academic kind of conundrum. But it's also kind of helping shape, after I'm finished, I would like to go into industry. So I'm getting the chance to work with, or at least, if not work with, be in the same sphere as these kind of top players in the industry I want to be in. So I can see, I know what they're doing, what they're working on, what's working well and what's not, even from a company culture perspective as well. They're in with us in Flowwave in the office for the 2 weeks that they're here. And I think that's invaluable to see how these companies are running, as well as the kind of main outputs that you can see that they're achieving from the outside. I mean, my day in a life, in terms of broad ID core, I think it's super varied depending on what company that you're with. Some of my peers are with, big household names like SSE and EDF. And then there's some of us in the smaller companies. So it really depends, but I do a mix of kind of experimental, hands-on stuff, which I quite like doing. You're up on your feet, you're away from your desk. And then I do quite a lot of numerical modeling, running simulations on the computer, analyzing data, and getting into the nitty-gritty of that. And then all of the project management things that come with, I think, doing a large research project like this, meetings with supervisors, attending events, conferences, time management, and things like that. So it's quite varied. And you're also kind of in charge mostly of your own schedule, which can be challenging at times, but then there's also things about that I quite like, which I think is sometimes a bit different from working 100% in industry.
Great, thank you, Casey. And Jacob, you've come through your academic pathway and you're now working as a lecturer. So how would you say that being part of an industry-led PhD has shaped your approach to teaching?
Well, it's definitely had an impact. I think it's easy just to teach a subject, but the main goal of obviously the teaching that I'm doing, or that anyone in the university does, is that for the undergraduates, we want the students to get a job. We want them to learn about a topic, and we want them to get a job in the end. So I feel like we can teach a lot of theory. That is very easily done, but there's a big difference between the actual practice that happens in the industry. So how I would check my teaching is I try to put as much or as many real life examples sprinkled throughout the modules. So if I talk about AI, I've taught this recently, I can go into the heavy math, but in 99% in the industry, they won't just make you look at the math. They will take something out of the box and apply that. And I feel like this is very important, especially in teaching, that I just don't only show you the theory, but I also show you the practice. How can we get things working right away? Because companies, a lot of times, they don't care how the math works. They want the product, they want it out the door, they want to go on the next one. So for my teaching, I try to get as many practical examples in as possible that are highly industry relevant. And the industry-led PhD is definitely an impact on that, simply because you get to see both sides, what's expected from the academic side, what's expected from the industry side.
And did you start your journey with teaching? Was that as a PhD student? Were you introduced to tutoring? That gives you that exposure to students.
Graduate teaching assistant, it's called. So you don't get a hold of a full module. So you don't need to do a full module, but you need to help out in classes, mostly in the practical classes. Before, when then I got appointed lecturer, I got given the full suit and say, "This is your module now. You're responsible for it."
Okay. And Helen, would you have anything to add to that from a teaching perspective?
Yeah, again, in as much experience as you can get, and I know over COVID, a lot of people didn't manage to get work experience. So As Jacob said, any kind of teaching assistance or lab work that you can get all builds up your portfolio and gives you the options when you finish if you do decide to go into academia.
Great, thank you. And I think one of the conversations that I have quite often with lecturers and other people within the universities is you've come through that PhD route, and so you obviously have a really keen interest in research. But when you become a lecturer, the teaching can quite easily take over. Do you still manage to get time for research, and how do you manage the balance there?
Yes, it's very challenging especially for new lecturers, because I think they're just hit with a tsunami of not just teaching but also admin, and then maybe trying to build up their research group as well and write proposals. And it is very, very difficult to juggle. And you mentioned mentors to start with. It's very important to know kind of what to focus on, your first grant, where that should go. So talk to your peers and try and get as much support as you can during that time.
And how are you managing that, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, we have a research allocation, but on the other hand, the research that one is doing, especially as a lecturer in a job, it's not just work. So I don't see the research that I'm doing as work. It's part of what I like to do as my hobby. So you sit outside of work hours and you read through the latest and newest papers just because you have a personal interest in that. And the same as if one wants to pursue a PhD, if you don't have a passion for the topic that you're going to research, it will be much more difficult. Rather than, for me, I had a passion for AI and machine learning, and therefore the PhD was easy. Well, not easy, but it was easier than if I wouldn't have had a passion for that. So it is definitely manageable, but like Helen said, it's not just all research, especially as a lecturer. It's administration and teaching all comes through that. So one needs to manage that.
Right. And Katie, have you had any exposure to teaching yet in your studies?
No, I've been taught. I have not been teaching.
You're not teaching, you've not been tutoring?
No, I haven't been.
Great. Okay. So this question is open to any of you, whoever wants to go first, but really just keen to understand what excites you about your work. What are the highlights of what you do? Helen looks like she's got something to say.
Okay. So it's really the people. So I mean, I'm head of informatics, which is the largest informatics school in the UK and one of the largest in the world. And it's just meeting all the people, academics and the professional services staff, but also the PDRAs, the researchers, the PhDs, the masters, the students. They're all at different stages of their career. And they're all doing fascinating stuff, and you can really see the passion in what they do that drives them to get out of bed and do, like Jacob said, if your job is your hobby, you're doing, life's going to be good. So that's really the highlight of my job, is the people.
Right, thank you. Katie, Jacob, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can. Okay, Katie, on you go.
No, I was just going to say, from a high level kind of view and just research in general, I quite like, once you're in your subject area, you kind of quite quickly see how much is unknown and how many things could be better. And I find that kind of prospect quite exciting, kind of potential for opportunity there quite exciting. And then more specifically, like in my own research, working with the industrial clients at Flowwave, you're kind of seeing the work that you do actually in action on the ground very quickly. The things that you're doing are being used and then making money very, very quickly and informing future kind of design iterations. So that's what excites me about my work.
And Jacob?
Yeah, just to add to that, so I'll say it from the teaching side. When one does research in a very, very heavily specialized area, one quickly becomes an expert, because there's not a lot of people in the world that do the same research as oneself. But what's also very good is that, as part of my job is I get to teach something that I'm passionate about. So it's not just me doing the research on my own and then talking to colleagues, but I also get to teach the future experts about the topics that I am interested in the hopes that they will then at one point surpass me. So I'm very passionate about the topic, and if I then get assigned a module that teaches AI, that makes me very happy, and I like this part of my job.
Fantastic, thank you. And obviously, unfortunately, it's not all highs in any job. So what would you say are the key skills that you need to be able to navigate the inevitable highs, but also the lows as well?
I can go first if you like.
Yeah, go for it, Helen. Yeah.
I mentioned this before, and it is resilience. I mean, it's really, really hard when you're starting up and you have, if you get a lectureship and you've got teaching and admin and research, and not every paper gets in and not every proposal gets funded, but it's all about taking a step back and learning from when things don't go completely your way. And there's always room for improvement. Take a proposal, get some feedback from your peer, submit it to another funder, and you never know. But you just have to have resilience to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and just, try again. And if you, by experience, if you keep trying, things will happen for you. So.
Jacob?
I can only second that. So when you asked that question, the first word that came to mind is resilience. It's going to be high and lows, but on average, one hopes that the trajectory goes slightly up. So it's going to be good weeks and bad weeks. It's going to be, for us as a lecturer, lots and lots of marking to do, and then still a paper deadline. So it means quite a bit of work, sometimes then not. But at that point, one just needs to see how to push through that, to then in the end get the benefits, and that it all will be good. And it will be. So resilience.
Do you have anything to add, Katie, from a student perspective?
Oh, I would definitely say resilience is the word that I would seek. And being able to kind of take a step back and view what you've done from a kind of much higher perspective, because you'll see that you've done more than you think, and you're further ahead than you were however long ago, and it allows you to kind of see the bigger picture. And yeah, that I think helps. Sometimes when you're so deep in the nitty-gritty, you need to kind of expand out for a little bit before you can go back in and try again.
And sorry, Jacob and Katie, from a student early career level perspective, are the support networks available within university to help you to develop skills, not just your technical skills? There's a lot of support out there, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. I think the nice thing about CDTs is, well, you've got multiple supervisors. I have 4 supervisors, which is a blessing and also challenging at times to manage 4 supervisors. But then, and we've got a class rep, but then you also have all of the resource and support of the universities that are offered to all students. But then subsequent to that, I think well, for my CDT anyway, there's about 10 people in each year group. And that first year of top modules is all based at Edinburgh, and it's quite intense. So you're all here living in Edinburgh, going through the same thing, and you kind of make quite close relationships. And we then have events, and we meet and make friends with the people in the years above and the years below. And then suddenly there's this network of ID Core alumni and students out there that have all been through the same thing as you. For like, one of my supervisors was one of the first ID Core students, and he's now come full circle and is supervising. So that's a great support, kind of being part of the wider process, and then seeing them all filter out into industry. You can always find an ID Core person now at events that I go to.
Yeah, good.
So that's definitely support.
Yeah, there's definitely wide support networks available in the institutions and the universities. So you don't just start a PhD and then you do the research on your own. Like Katie said, you have, I think for us it's at least 2 supervisors. Usually it's more than that, 3 or 4. So you can talk to all of them about anything that you have, your problems or any ideas that you may have. But out with of them, then you also have the university networks. So they have the graduate schools, and there's also usually societies or groups of fellow PhD students that you can talk to and build up your network with.
Great, thank you. And I think we've spoken a lot about, the opportunity that's out there. I think without even looking at the question and answers, I'm sure that what's on everybody's mind is, well, actually, how do I get there? How do I get started? If this is something that interests me, what next? So I think, Helen, from your experience as a director of a CDT in robotics, what are the key things that you would look for in prospective PhD students?
So the main thing is potential. So in order to come as a CDT director as a level playing field, it's really important to try and understand people's potential, because not everybody has opportunities to do fancy internships or to publish a paper coming out of their masters. They might just not have had the opportunities that other people have. So it's really important to try and understand, would they be able to drive their own research agenda? Do they have their own ideas? You don't have to be an expert. When you come to an interview for a PhD place, it might be quite scary, but you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be able to understand a bit about the background of your field and come up with some ideas and be able to articulate those well. And also try and be a little bit brave. So if you're coming, so my background is linguistics, and I try to understand about AI and computer science. But a lot of these centres will take people from different backgrounds. So for the CDT in robotics, we struggled with diversity, to be honest. And in order to increase diversity, we increased the backgrounds of people that we were accepting, and it worked really, really well. So we had people, from perhaps related fields like psychology and cognitive science, but also, for example, textiles and fashion design. And those people really thrived, and they were able to do that because a lot of these programs have integrated teaching. So if you're coming from a different background, I'd really talk to the people who are running the centre and say, will I be trained up enough to succeed? And I'm sure many of these centres will help you in that regard here.
Do you get, Helen, what's the sort of application rate on these things? Like, do you get, are you overrun with applications? Is it a very competitive process?
Yes. Yeah. We get about 200 applications for 15 places.
Yeah, okay.
For UK students, if I'm honest, with Brexit, you have a better chance now because there are higher restrictions for EU students. So if you're from the UK, you do have a better chance of getting in these days. But it is very competitive. And that's why I said, you've got to publish a paper to get into CDT. That's not necessarily true, as long as you can do what I said, about coming across, understanding a subdiscipline, a field, and having some good ideas, then you've got a good chance.
Great, thank you. And Katie, where did you hear about the opportunity within your own CDT, and what do you think helped your application to be successful in such a competitive field?
So I'd actually heard about ID Core because one of my friends had applied the year before. He studied in England, so he graduated the year before me. So I kind of stored, I was like, that sounds interesting, stored it until I came around to graduating, and did a bit more research and was really attracted to it. Now I think I was kind of lucky there, because I think, events like this are valuable because I'm not sure if I would have come across it otherwise. I hope I would have. I don't know. So that was kind of a stroke of luck there. And then for me, well, my application, I very nearly actually didn't get in. I missed out on getting an interview, and then someone dropped out and I got another chance to interview very last minute. So I think just kind of echoing what Helen said there, I kind of went into that interview with no expectations, which sort of allowed me to, I think, kind of come across as myself and kind of be confident in that. And I think that is kind of what signed the deal, really. I came out of that kind of group interview with the place that was up for grabs, having gone in, I guess you could think about it at the bottom of the pile in terms of my CV and personal statement application. So I think that was really valuable, asking the interviewers questions, talking about myself. And I kind of drew on some of my more life. I play a lot of sports, so I used that in some of the more questions that were targeted towards non-engineering technical ability, I think, and that shows that you're kind of a multifaceted person that has many interests and hobbies, and can perform in different areas that can still apply towards your engineering. Yeah, so I would keep eyes open for opportunities and keep going and grab the ones, even if it might seem stressful that the interview's tomorrow. If it happens, grab it, and it might work out.
Given that you're saying that you missed out on that interview process and then you ended up with an interview, are you able to say, on reflection, what you would have done differently if you were to apply again to make sure you got that interview? Do you realise what you missed when you were doing the written application?
I think it was potentially a lack of experience in particularly renewables. My background was more aerospace and aeronautics in my course. So I think it was maybe that I maybe had I was obviously top of the list of the no's. That makes sense. So I must have just missed out, and then I got that random opportunity, and then got the place out of that group interview, out of that final interview session, and there was about 10 people there, so whatever I said in the interview must have landed. But I think it was just an experience thing, and then they must have seen, hopefully, as what Helen said, then the potential when they actually met me face to face.
Yeah, well done. And Jacob, what was your experience of applying for the PhD? What hurdles did you have to cross, and how did you get there?
I would say for me it was a bit easier. For me, I got scouted during my master's dissertation. So I got approached by a supervisor because we were looking for a PhD student. I'm obviously still needed to have an interview and all that, but for me it was easy on the side that they asked me, your results in the master's look quite good. Do you want to have a talk about a potential PhD studentship? So for me, it wasn't that I needed to go through a rigorous application process, but I'm sure that this is rare that this happens like that.
Yeah, but it does happen. And certainly for all of you out there that are doing masters courses at the moment, it's worth having conversations with your supervisors to understand the opportunities that might be sitting on your doorstep. And so there is the website findingphd.com, which has just about every PhD opportunity available to it. Do you have any other advice as to where students can look if they're interested in applying for doctoral programs, or who they should be talking to?
I think so I know my two institutions that I was at, and they have researcher profiles available. I'm sure it applies to all the universities in Scotland as well. And a lot of the times, these researchers put their interest and their research topics on there, and they can also put down that they're looking for PhD students. A lot of the times they're looking for self-funded students, but at the same point, it's still always worth reaching out to researchers whose research you're interested in, and just have a chat about your interests and whether they have anything in the pipeline in regards to PhD applications. So talk to researchers whose research you're interested in, simply because they may have something coming up, and then you may be at the top of the list.
Yeah. Helen, do you have anything to add to that?
I just replied to Marion and sent some a URL. Not sure if everybody can see that. Oh yes, here we go. So they have announced the UKRI CDTs. So have a look at that list, and then there'll be websites on how you can apply to those, as well as find a PhD. The EPSRC also have, so these are the more engineering orientated CDTs. They have told the universities, but they haven't announced yet. That's still under embargo. So check that. Keep an eye out on the news for EPSRC and UKRI, because that should be coming up in the next few weeks. So lots and lots of opportunities. We're very fortunate that the UK government does fund these CDTs to a very high level. Yeah. There are other opportunities outside CDTs. CDTs are great for things such as the cohort effect that Katie mentioned. But if you have a favourite professor really interested in their work, they may have opportunity in their labs. So just do a bit of homework and you'll find opportunities.
Great, thank you, Helen. And so I see, just looking at the questions, I think it's probably a good time to turn to the questions, because I think there's a few related questions that are coming in at the moment. For anyone, Helen has posted in the Q&A box a link to some of the centres that will be advertising shortly on CDT vacancies. But some other questions in here. So I think the question in from Marianne here is looking for, is it better to do an MSc before applying for a PhD? Is it compulsory for someone? Or if we've got people on the call who are maybe don't have a master's but are thinking about moving into this field, where should they start, and what would your advice be, Helen? Probably you're the best person to start with this one.
It is tricky. So some CDTs do a 1+3, so a master's and then 3 years of the PhD. We've moved away from that this call of CDTs at the University of Edinburgh. It's because a lot of people do come with a master's already, and the master's can be all consuming, and then you don't get onto your PhD until the very beginning of the second year. So you've only got 3 years of funding to finish that PhD. So we've moved away from that, so just having a 4-year PhD. But because it is so competitive, I have to say you've got a much better chance if you do have a master's. But I would talk to the CDT that you're interested in, get a feel. They may say come back next year with a master's, or they may say, yeah, apply, see how you get on.
Great, thank you. And then just a related question to that, out with academia, are there thoughts around whether having a master's makes a huge difference in applying for jobs in industry as well? Do any of you have any experience or can comment on that from what you see in your teaching perspective, how you're supporting students out of the door?
In the field of AI and robotics, a master's in AI will get you a long way. You will get a really good starting package, likely, if you have a master's in AI. A PhD, that's one more level. We are seeing some people going into industry, starting off with a really good starting package of the PhD. An undergrad, we want to get some work experience, and then maybe you think about coming back for a master's, and then that's fine as well. It's all about lifelong learning. If you can show that you can learn quickly, maybe the company that you're interested in will have its own in-house training and personal development program. It really is quite hard to say definitely, you should get a master's. It's all about, where you are, and also, perhaps financially. But if you think that maybe master's isn't for you, then look for companies that will help with your career progression and personal development. That's what I would advise.
And it's worth just adding in there, if there are any undergrads on the call who are interested and are considering masters, at the Data Lab at the moment, we have a number of scholarships that we'll be announcing shortly, or fully funded scholarships at universities across Scotland in data and AI related courses. And I think Marianne's on the call. If she's not, we can get someone to post details of that programme into the chat for you to have a look at that, as that might be an option that you want to consider going forward. There's a question here as well around progression. So someone with a master's who likes to work in the university environment but is not fussed about salary difference in comparison to industry, and wonders, are there opportunities for graduates to find work at universities, like as research assistants or something else, without committing to a PhD?
Yes, definitely, yes. So you could come in as a research associate, and that's a really good way of finding out if university environment is right for you. And then a lot of people do PhDs part-time while they are researching. So yes, definitely look for opportunities there. You don't need a PhD in some cases. Many jobs you will need one, but there will be jobs available for those without PhDs in teaching or research. Yeah.
I was going to say, do you need a PhD to go into teaching?
Not necessarily. We
No.
have teaching university teachers, we call them. Some of them, as I say, some of them do PhDs part-time while they're doing the teaching. Yeah, it's more teaching focused.
Great, thank you. Brilliant. Okay. And I think another question there, is it possible to visit and find out more about the research being carried out before at a particular CDT before applying? All of the CDTs have their own websites, don't they, that have quite a lot of detail around them, and they'll have contacts there that you can get in touch with if you want to find out more.
Yep,
Yeah.
Some have virtual open days, some have real open days. I wouldn't email, too often academics because they're very, very busy, but, approach one or two, say you're interested in their research, then they may have time, give you a quick call, talk a bit further about it. Most people are happy to talk about their work. So.
Great, thank you. And then another question we've got here, just when considering if someone's thinking, research and development might be something I want to pursue, any advice on what you might want to consider when choosing the focus of your research? For anybody?
Just be passionate about it, I guess. If you're doing a PhD, you're 4 years of it, so you've got to do something you enjoy. And typically, if you're passionate about something at any level of education, then you will do well. Great,
thank you. And I think one of the questions I'd like to just jump back to, kind of going through it, we're talking, broadly around this research and development in the context of data and AI. Helen, you've had a number of years' experience in the National Robotarium. I think some people on the call here would probably be interested to hear a bit more about that work and some of the types of research outputs that have come out from there.
So the National Robotarium is really an extension of the Edinburgh Centre of Robotics, where we have about 80 academics at Heriot-Watt and Edinburgh University working in robotics, autonomous systems, and AI related to robotics. So the Robotarium is a big building, it's a fantastic facility for running experiments. For example, we have a living lab that's basically an apartment with a front door, so robots can, for example, come in and put away shopping and go back out again, and we can test, for example, healthy aging applications of robotics in a kind of safe environment. So we have that, and we have there's moonscapes for robots for hazardous environments. So it's an amazing facility. But the ethos around it is taking the research from this Edinburgh Centre of Robotics, this group of world-leading academics, taking that research and translating it, working with companies to translate it into the real world, into the marketplace. So that's kind of what the Robotarium is about.
And is there CDTs based within the Robotarium, or are they linked to the Robotarium, or?
Yes, so there's a CDT called DARE. It's about deployable, dependable robotics. So we're seeing now at Edinburgh University, we have 3 CDTs that have been funded under the UKRI call, and they're all focusing now on, so they're renewed CDTs, but they're focusing on how we get this technology out there. So we have one that's called NLP in the wild. So doing, interactions and language understanding in the wild with biomedical AI innovation. So how we get this, the advances, really fascinating, in biomedical AI into the real world, and then the dependable, deployable robotics. How we can use AI to make robots robust enough to be deployed and so benefit society, as well as increase productivity. So. Yes, it's a very exciting time. So if you're interested, then there are a lot of places. So please, I would encourage everybody to apply.
Great, thanks, Helen. It sounds a fantastic opportunity for people. Just got time for a couple of more questions I can see coming in. Do any of you have any advice for EU or international students around resources and funding, given where we are at the moment with things for PhD?
Yeah, so I did say it's a bit trickier for those outside the UK, but there are means. So all of the CDTs have industry opportunities, and they may help with those fees. Also, the UKRI EPSRC ones, 30% of those can be international EU, and some universities do waive the fee. So Edinburgh University, on a case-by-case basis, will waive international fees for some of those places. So again, just ask the question. You may find that there are more opportunities that, for you for funded places if you're coming from the EU and international.
Great, thank you. And another question around PhD applications. Somebody has asked whether or not there's opportunity for people to apply with their own research topics, or whether or not these are set by the universities that are advertising the PhDs.
I hate to be answering all the questions, but it depends on the CDT. So some
Yeah.
of the CDTs, they post topics that that they have supervisors for, that they're interested in. That might be specific topics, or it might be themes. And then you apply for that topic or that theme. But when you are applying for a topic, it's really important that you don't just parrot what the topic description is, that you do come up with some new angle or some new innovation that you think you might be interested in working on.
I think, Jacob, do you have any, I think from my experience working with the industrial doctorate programme in the data lab, I think there is a mix away from CDTs. And I think quite often if someone has done a master's and they have their master's supervisor, then quite often that research topic may come from the master's dissertation, or in respect of the data lab, we quite often see PhDs might come out of their industry placement. So they actually, they're almost like a natural progression from the work that the master's student is doing.
Yeah, that's outwards of the CDTs. So I know at UWS, and it was at Glasgow Caledonia, it was the same. So that there are supervisors who apply for funding from other sources out with that, and then they can, assign a PhD or get a PhD student in on that. But for getting back to the question that if one has their own custom research topics, that will go back to my previous advice: find a researcher, a professor, or lecturer who has the same research interest, and then just have a chat with them, see how you can match that, because they may have some funding in the pipeline that may come through, so you can change it a little bit to suit everyone's needs. But I know that may not be the route for everyone, but if you are really, really interested in a topic and you have the available funds, a lot of the times there's also self-funded PhDs available, where you approach a supervisor, you have a chat with them about your topic, and then they will support you in the PhD journey. At the same time, you will then need to have the funds to pay for the university fees yourself. I know that's not an option for everyone, but the option is definitely out there. On the other hand, one could also work in a company and maybe get them to finance that if you have a topic that aligns with them. And have a chat with your employer then if you want to pursue a PhD, and they would have or give you full or part of the backing on that, and then you can approach the universities. Yeah,
we've had experience of that in the data lab. Some of our industrial doctorates, they've actually already been working within the company, and it's the organisation has led to the PhD, so they've had fully funded by their company. So that's another option for consideration. Okay, I'm just conscious of time and just want to kind of round things up. And I want to say a huge thank you to Helen and Katie and Jacob for your time and your experience and your insights. I'd just like to finish the panel just by posing a question to all of you. So at the Data Lab's recent Data Summit, we were exploring the topic, AI will support us, AI will replace us. I'm just really keen to understand your view on that in the context of the emerging need for these skills going forward and the importance of continuing to have this pipeline of talent coming through. Katie, would you like to go first? You've been quiet for a while.
Yes, okay. I think I'm kind of in the AI will support us party. My research isn't in AI, so I use kind of the sort of public, like ChatGPT and stuff, to kind of support my data analysis. But I'm not involved deeply in these tools. But I don't think it has the critical thinking or the curiosity to replace us. But I do think it'll be vital to kind of broaden our ability to research things and analyze things and test things more efficiently and effectively. I think it's quite exciting what it could do and how it will be present in, I think, all research in all disciplines. But we'll see.
Thank you. Helen, I'm going to move to you next. I know that you have to leave us for another meeting, so I'm going to ask you to answer the question very quickly to give you your pass to depart. And thank you.
I'm an advocate of AI as a tool. So tools that help increase productivity, tool to improve society, for example, healthy aging, tool for research. We have to have safeguards and regulations in place going forwards. We have to do this with caution, but I really do think that it has the potential to make everyone's lives a bit better if we do it right. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. And Jacob, you have the final word.
Yes, following up from what Helen said, I think it will definitely support us. It will replace some tasks that we are doing, just as when the computer came around and everything is digitalized. It was replaced a lot of the manual work that we needed to do. But it will definitely support a lot of work going forward, and it will hopefully make life better for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for attending. As mentioned at the start of this, I would let you know about some upcoming events, specifically the events that are coming up as part of our employability series. So these are all available in the community. So a reminder, if you haven't already done it, to join the community for access to all of this and more. So on the 31st of January, we have an online event, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome as a Data and AI Professional. On the 14th of February, we have Mastering Technical Interview Questions in Data and AI. On the 28th of February, we have What Technical Skills Do Data and AI Employers Want to See? And all of those events are online. And then on the 12th of March, I'd be delighted to invite you all to attend our in-person annual recruitment event, Data Talent, which this year will take place at the Glasgow Science Centre. At that event, we bring in a number of employers from across Scotland who are actively looking to hire in data science and the AI skills. We also at that event run a number of workshops this year. The workshops from a skills development perspective cover CVs, tools like Git and GitHub, data engineering, entrepreneurship, immigration support for international students, data warehousing, data visualization, and a further deep dive into research and development. And everyone who attends Data Talent has the opportunity to attend up to 3 of those workshops, as well as to meet with the employers in our exhibition hall. Tickets are £20 for students and £69 for non-students to attend. I think, Jacob, have you been to Data Talent? Have you had experience of that event? He can probably tell you firsthand what it's like, whether it's worth it.
It was on a panel. It was great. It's a very great opportunity for if you're still looking for a job, to talk to employers and just find out what's out there. And one of the most important things, to increase your network. So don't only talk to the employers, but also talk to fellow students who may be in the same boat. Because they get hired, they may have some insight, and you may just follow them.
Great, thank you. So on that note, I would say thank you very much, and hopefully you can join us at future events. Thank you.